Chapter 14. Eiji was awakened by a sickening lurch. After all these years of living on a ship, he was no longer alarmed by this. Envying the hammocks used in the general service barracks, he rolled over and tried to go back to sleep. Unfortunately, his bladder had other ideas, so Eiji dragged himself out of bed with a cavernous yawn. As he began shuffling back from his little washroom, grateful for the straps that kept his chamber pot in its place and the lid that kept its contents secured, the ship rocked again. He stumbled and fell heavily to his knees. Ouch! He wasn't a teenager anymore, and he spent a fair amount of time on his knees. They couldn't handle... There was a scraping sound, and then Eiji was knocked sprawling by a sudden blow to his left shoulder. He caught himself on his right elbow, barely saving his head from striking the floor, but the lightning shot of pain from the abused joint combined with the pain in his knees to tear an agonized howl from his mouth. Even through the haze of pain, Eiji knew what had hit him. It was his chest of belongings. Damn it! He'd known it was dangerous to leave the heavy, sharp-edged thing sitting unsecured, but he'd had nowhere to put his clothes, and now half his body was on fire, and he was letting out another moan despite his best efforts, and... Eiji? Lord Felix's voice cut anxiously into his thoughts. Are you all right? Yes, my lord, Eiji whimpered. Wonderful, Eiji. That's sure to convince him. Sure enough, Lord Felix tried again. May I come in? He asked. And what could Eiji say to that? My lord may do as he Fuck! Eji's arm finally registered the blow it had sustained, and pain lanced all the way from his shoulder to his fingertips, choking his courtesies off into a curse. The word wasn't even all the way out of his mouth when Lord Felix was there, dropping heedlessly to his knees in front of Eiji. Even in the dark, Eiji could see the worried nodding of the god's brow. Where are you injured? Lord Felix asked. Shoulder, Eiji grunted. He was blind with pain and couldn't force out a single word beyond that. He started to lift his other arm to cradle the shoulder, but moving his elbow sent a fresh jolt of pain up that arm. He moaned again. May I help you up? Lord Felix's voice was calm, which for some suicidal reason made Eiji want to swear and snap at him, but that was unthinkable, so why was he thinking about it? Yes, sir, he wheezed instead. Eji's master touched his sore elbow, but pulled his hand back at the hiss of pain Eiji couldn't quite swallow. Instead of trying his elbow again, Lord Felix put his hands lightly on either side of Eji's rib cage and just hoisted him. Eji's squeak was less pain than surprise. He'd seen the strength of the gods on display plenty of times before, of course, but there was something so shocking about being plucked up as easily as a fallen pillow. The ship tilted again, but Lord Felix kept his feet without even seeming to notice. 2 or 3 steps, and the god was setting Eiji carefully on the edge of his bed. There, his master said. Do you think you can stay upright if I leave now to get Julia? I don't know, Eiji faltered. The rough seas showed no signs of gentling, and both his arms were throbbing. The idea of catching himself on either... All right, Lord Felix said, calm as ever. That's fine. We can wait. Just breathe for a little, all right, sweetheart? Eiji shut his eyes and obeyed. The rocking continued, but the big hands gripping him didn't allow him to lean too far in one direction or the other. He let himself relax into his master's firm hold. He's got me. It's all right. It seemed like ages before the pain started to subside, but slowly Eji's thoughts cleared. He felt the sharp speed of his own breath and the juddering of his pulse. He felt droplets of sweat trickling down his forehead, his sides, the back of his legs. He felt the throbbing of his shoulder, his elbow, even his knees. He felt Lord Felix's hands. Eiji knew at once that he needed to apologize for disturbing the god, for his rudeness, for... He would think of the rest once he started, he decided hazily. He opened his eyes. Lord Felix was gazing intently up at him, his hands still planted securely on either side of Eji's middle. He was looking up at Eiji because he was kneeling on the floor at Eji's feet. The image was so viscerally wrong that Eiji swayed not from any movement of the ship, but from a sudden burst of vertigo. This can't be happening! No, 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 no! Easy, the god soothed. Are you feeling any better? My lord! Why couldn't Eiji muster more words than that? He wanted to grab the god and tug him to his feet, but of course that would only make things worse. Can you try something for me, dear? His master went on in the same steady tone. I want you to try to move your shoulder. Can you do that? Yes, my lord. His voice had never sounded more pathetic, Eiji thought with vague disgust. He lifted his arm and circled it gingerly in the air. The movement sent hot needles of pain digging into his shoulder joints, but at least his body was responding to his commands. Good. The god sounded so relieved that Eiji dared to glance down at him and found him beaming. It's not broken or dislocated. That's wonderful. We were lucky. Forgive me for making such a fuss, my lord, Eiji managed. I'm ashamed of my behavior. Not at all, dear. Lord Felix shook his head and gave Eji's middle a little squeeze where he still held him. I'm just grateful. It was the chest, wasn't it? This could have been so much worse. The chest. Where was it now? Eiji cast his gaze around the room, then down. He saw that Lord Felix had pinned the chest between his own knee and the bed frame, keeping it from sliding anywhere. Eiji... The god's voice was hesitant, and Eiji thought he could guess what he was about to ask. This really ought to be secured. Eiji had been right. And Lord Felix had been right to reprimand him. As his mind cleared, Eiji was slowly realizing the magnitude of his negligence. How could even he have been so foolish? I'm so sorry, my lord. I didn't know where else to put my clothes, and I'm sorry for damaging my lord's property. Please punish me for my oversight. Sweetheart, no! The god sounded horrified. That isn't what I meant. I wasn't scolding you. I'm just glad you're safe. That's all that matters. As if the sight of his master on his knees at Eji's feet weren't sick and wrong enough already, the god bent his head to drop a tender kiss on the back of Eji's hand. Eji flinched, though the cool lips felt wonderful on his heated skin. His whole body was screaming that this was not right, that it was unnatural, that some kind of punishment was sure to follow. At his involuntary recoil, Lord Felix pulled back so quickly that it almost seemed like he was flinching as well. Forgive me, Eiji, he said. I shouldn't have done that without asking. Wrong, 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 wrong. The thought battered at Eji's brain along with his rising pulse. I only wanted you to know that you aren't in any trouble, the god continued. If you don't want to put your clothes in the wardrobe, I'd be happy to bolt the chest down for you. I'll do it as soon as we steady. Eiji rushed to explain himself. It isn't that, my lord. I'm very grateful that you would allow me the use of the wardrobe, but it's already full, my lord. Oh. Silence fell and stretched. Eiji kept his eyes fixed on his hands where they rested on his thighs. His hands, his full traitor body that had flinched away from its master's kind touch. What was wrong with him? Yesterday had been so wonderful, and now he was ruining everything. I should have removed those things as soon as you arrived, Lord Felix said, his voice low and rough as he cut into Eji's thoughts. They belonged to Hiroya, the last man to live with me. He died, goodness, it must have been 60 years ago now. I'm ridiculous to have held on to his things for so long. The room tilted again. The movement set Eji's shoulder throbbing, but he was grateful for the way the pain cut through his confusion. It wasn't his place to figure out why his master sounded close to tears at the thought of a long-dead slave. He just needed to react to the information he was being given. My lord seemed to have cared for him very much, he murmured. No doubt he was a remarkable attendant to warrant such attentions. He was a remarkable friend, the god said softly. We used to talk for hours about poetry. He wrote it, too. It was so incredibly lovely. And he would always demand that I write him poems as presents, even though I'm a terrible poet. He never made fun of me for it, though he certainly wasn't so restrained about other things. He and his lover used to pretend they couldn't hear me because I was talking so quietly. They just sit there and ask, 'Did you hear something?' Perhaps I think it was a fly or a delicate ocean breeze. They thought they were hilarious." Lord Felix was definitely crying now, but Edgy could also see the glint of his smile in the dark. For his part, Edgy was still stuck in surprise. "His lover, my lord?" he asked cautiously. "Oh yes, Kazue. She lived with Cloelia." This was even more confusing. "She, my lord?" "Yes," Lord Felix nodded. "She was a woman, whatever your priest said, and they were so happy together it made me happy just to see them. I was very blessed to be granted those years." Edgy had assumed that this sainted Hiroya had been Lord Felix's lover, but apparently not. Apparently, the god had been telling the truth when he said that some of his past attendants had lived with him chastely as friends. Between his pain and his master's presence, Edgy didn't have the mental space to parse through the swell of complicated emotions this possibility for his own future stirred up in him. "But that's no excuse to make you live among his old things," the god said briskly. "I'll get them cleaned out so you can move in. I should have done that right from the beginning, or, if I'm being honest, years ago. I'm so fortunate to have you here to help me realize that. Thank you, Edgy." "I am grateful if my lord finds my service acceptable," Edgy whispered, bewildered all over again. The god simply hummed his acknowledgment, and Edgy retreated into the safety of his list. 42. Lord Felix loved his former attendant. 43. Lord Felix did not require sexual services from his attendants. Was that a good fact or a bad one? Never mind, he would figure it out later. 44. Lord Felix did not consider himself an able poet. 45. Lord Felix enjoyed discussing poetry. Edgy had studied plenty of poets, despite never really enjoying the art form himself, so hopefully he wouldn't disgrace himself too badly in conversation. 46. Lord Felix thought Edgy wouldn't welcome his lips. How he was going to rectify that mistake, Edgy didn't have the faintest idea. 47. Lord Felix's hands anchoring him made Edgy feel safer than anything else had ever done in his life. No, he would strike out that last one. That wasn't a fact. That was his fool mind, loopy with pain and starved for touch. He was being ridiculous. Still, when the rocking stopped and his master left to fetch Lord Julia, just in case, there's no sense in being careless, Edgy immediately missed him. Even at arm's length and from a deeply improper position, he had enjoyed being held.